Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Professor Bart Kay is a former senior lecturer in cardiovascular and respiratory physiology, exercise physiology, nutrition, research methods, and statistics. Professor Kay has published a number of peer reviewed research and review articles, as well as book chapters. Bart Kay has successfully taught aspects of physiology, anatomy, biochemistry, metabolism, nutrition, and research design and statistics since 2001, both in the United Kingdom and in Australasia. He has consulted regarding optimal physical performance to the New Zealand All Blacks, the National Rugby League Referees Association, the Royal Australian Defence Force, and the Royal New Zealand Army. He is a prolific content creator on several major platforms and has a major audience on several channels on YouTube. His primary channel is titled Professor Bart K Main Channel and has tens of thousands of subscribers. He has appeared on many major podcasts all over the world, including the Plant Free MD podcast with our former guest, Dr. Anthony Chafee, the Keto Savage podcast with another former guest, Robert Sykes, and Mark Bell's Power Project, among others. Professor Bart K, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Casey, thank you very much. It's my privilege and my pleasure to be here. And goodness, I've been busy, haven't I?
Very busy, for sure. Before we get started, I have to just say happy birthday to you. I think you turned 51, was it yesterday?
That's right, yes. Yep.
That's fantastic. What is going on in the carnivore world is people are getting chronologically older, yet they just look younger and younger and younger all the time.
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Casey. I think that's what's happening. I think we genuinely are aging backwards in a biological sense. The longer that a person eats a diet that is appropriate for their species, their genetic gift, the way that their ancestors evolved over, deep time, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years, so much the better. Of course, I'm also taking a supplement range that's involved in encouraging my adult stem cell system to upregulate its activities, and I think that's definitely had an impact as well. Yeah, so that's it's a rich tapestry, but I think that's what's going on. I think we're doing the right thing, and we're getting the benefits.
Yeah, that's fantastic. If I'm not sure if you've listened to the most recent episode of the podcast we mentioned in the introduction, the Plant Free MD, Dr. Chafee interviewed this woman who's a rancher, I want to say in northern Alberta in Canada, and she's been doing it for like 60 years. She's been mostly carnivore in that time, and now she's in her 80s. And I was listening to the interview, and I'm like, there's no way she's in her 80s. I could tell just by the voice, like she's really bright and quick and talking about things really, really well. And so I had to just pull up the video to watch this woman. She looks like she's in her 50s. It's
Yes.
incredible. And I just look back and think like, man, to get the information that we know now, when we were much younger, would have been so great.
Yeah, I mean, another example of that, not on the same caliber, because I mean, the woman you're talking about, Maggie, she has been a carnivore, as you say, for 65 years. Incredible.
65 years.
Now, I'll give you another example. There's a bloke we know called Richard, or Rick, if you like, Rodriguez. He went carnivore when he was 15, about the same age that Maggie went carnivore when she did it. That was 40 years ago. Richard looks to be in his middle 30s, if you're lucky. He's in his mid 50s. He works a physical job. He doesn't have a gray hair on his head or in his bed or anywhere. He stands bolt upright, looks strong and lithe, and it's a thing.
It's amazing. He was telling Dr. Chafee in that episode of the show, like how he would kill iguanas in the neighborhood and that would be dinner. He would control the duck population in his neighborhood by eating duck eggs for breakfast all over the place. What a cool guy. And you're right. He said he's not been to the dentist or to the doctor since the 1980s. It's incredible. It's absolutely amazing. And now I know you've been in this game for a long time. You've been ketogenic for over 25 years. What made you interested in nutrition to begin with?
I did my first undergraduate degree as an already so-called mature student at that time. I was actually in my late 20s when I started my first degree, and that was actually in sport and exercise science at the time, is what it was called. Now it's called the physiology of rest and exercise, whatever. And I did that, and I did a module or a paper, whatever they're called, wherever you are, one of the blocks in the degree, one of the courses that you do. And it was in nutrition for sports science, or for sports activity. And Not a single thing they said in that course made the slightest bit of sense whatsoever. It all went straight at my flagpole as, this is rubbish. This is false. I need to check this out. And so once I'd finished with all my studies in physiology and got my terminal research degree in physiology, I taught that for 10 years with this nutrition in the background in my head, was burning a hole in my consciousness the whole time. And when I had had enough of the sport and exercise physiology area, I decided I'll go and get another degree in nutrition. Wow. I was right. Everything they say in nutrition studies is nonsense. So I did that anyway. And that started my interest in talking about nutrition. And then, as it turns out, subsequent to that, I did another research degree on top of that one as well in cardiovascular pathophysiology. And anyway, 25 years later, now I'm a YouTube influencer.
And a great one at that.
Thank you.
I really appreciate that. I followed you for a lot of years. And at first I didn't really understand the way you were presenting some of your information and the way that you were. And it looked like you were kind of changing personas, but now I understand a lot more. You're doing this to be able to reach people. And that's a really great way to reach people. And I understand and appreciate that. And I see why some people might get turned off by your content, but frankly, I wish people would tune into you. In fact, I just sent one of my clients a clip of I can't remember exactly what you were talking about in this clip. I've been consuming all of your stuff for the last few days, but I told my client to really pay attention to how carefully Bart constructs his ideas and the way he says things. It's very considered, and he's not just throwing ideas out there. And I contrast it with an article that she sent me that was all about, arguments for vegetarian and vegan diets. And they're circular, the straw man. They never go anywhere. Yet again, in this world, I hear people like yourself that are very careful about the way you say things.
Yep. Yes, I'm glad you've noticed that. Several threads there. First of all, yes, there is a lot of play acting. There are 5 or 6 different characters that I will play and swap between and change around between, sometimes even mid-video, if it strikes me that I should be in this character and not that one at the time. Yes, play acting. What I'm actually doing is educating by subterfuge. What I have found is that people who watch a lot of YouTube, which is my bread and butter, getting people to watch, people that watch a lot of YouTube tend to want actually to be amused, stunned, amazed, surprised, or offended. They don't care. One of those things, something emotive. The last thing they want, most of them, apparently, is to actually be educated. That's what I do. I educate. So I have to do it by subterfuge. I have to have some kind of a hook, some kind of an act. So that's why we do that. I was, for quite a few years, quite abrasive on a lot of my videos, quite sweary. I used a lot of very short words, incredibly short ones, in fact. I'm not doing that so much now. Now that I've kind of broken through a level of viewership where, as you say, there are tens of thousands of people watching, that has enough momentum, I think, now that I can probably leave most of that behind and concentrate on being abrasive without the effing and jeffing so much.
Yeah, it seemed like most of those words had about 4 letters or so, if I had to guess.
About 4, yeah, fairly monosyllabic stuff.
Give or take.
Yeah. So yeah, most of that stuff is I'm not doing so much now. I leave most of that to Ted these days. He's the one that uses that kind of language now.
Perfect. That's great. Well, no, I appreciate the way you share your message. And look at our numbers versus your numbers. You're attracting more people. And this is an important message that we need to get out there. I often hear sometimes people criticizing people like Ken Berry, Dr. Ken Berry, who's in the carnivore space, for doing so much on social media. And it's like, dude, that's where people are. You need to be on social media because that's where the people are. That's how you can reach people. And look at all the good he's done in the world for doing it. It's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish I had Ken Berry's numbers.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, he's amazing. 3.5 million something, whatever it is, millions.
It's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot. Tell us a little bit about your transition from low carbohydrate to carnivore.
Yeah. Okay. So that was about 27 years ago, give or take. It was one of the periods in time in which the low carb approach was coming back into fruition. It was popular again. It seems to be quite cyclic, really, every 20 years or so, whatever it is. someone says, hey, have you looked at this low carb thing? It's really quite good. And people get into it and it works, and there's an explosion of that. It was around that time. I was very early in my academic career at that time, and I was very much belligerent and looking for the different approach and how everyone else was wrong. Completely unlike now. I'm kidding. And so, yeah, I just grabbed onto it and said, okay, this is different from what everyone else is saying. And it's in line with what I thought made sense, because what I had been learning in the nutrition studies did not make any sense at all. So I grabbed it and ran with it, just purely to prove my lecturers, my professors wrong. And I've never looked back. I've never gone back to a high carb diet ever since.
Yeah.
And that's basically how that happened. It was purely out of belligerence.
Yeah. Wow. That's a great way to do things, a great reason why doing things. And if you're like me and most other carnivores, do you find the diet to be very self-selecting? Meaning once you start, it's very easy to stay on it, because you start to notice when you do drift off of it, just how severely bad you feel and how much you would not like to give that away to not feel good anymore.
Yes. Yeah. It's a very common thing that we find with people on very low carb and indeed carnivore diets, is that anytime they go off piste, if they've been clean for, even a few months, and then they go and have some cake or whatever, or drink some dirty beer or whatever it is, their body reacts very, very strongly, much more strongly than it ever did before they went nominally clean diet.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say, well, if there's anything wrong with the carnivore diet, it's that you can no longer step off piste. And I'm like, well, actually, that's a blessing, is it not? Because if your body gives you a very, very clear message and you feel really, really bad having done that, that's going to encourage you to not do that anymore.
That's right.
Which is a good thing, surely.
That's great. Yeah.
But yes, I absolutely have noticed that.
That's fantastic. Well, I really appreciate you sharing your story and all of that. You have a real gift of explaining very complicated things and making them easy to understand, whether it's a long form video or something short, even if it's just a minute or a few minutes. I really appreciate the way you cover lots of different things and really are very careful with your words and help us understand the myths that are out there and the things that people talk about. So if you don't mind, today, during this episode, I would like to ask you about some of those myths that are out there. I wanted to kind of start in the normal nutrition space. Maybe somebody who's eating a mixed diet, they're not really aware of a carnivore diet or low carbohydrate. And then as the conversation goes, I would like to drift more and more into the carnivore world and ask some questions that even carnivores seem to not really understand or get confused by. What I want to start with is the idea of calories in, calories out. So this week alone, a very big book came out by a very popular author. He's been in the content creation space for a long time, blogging, podcasting. His book came out this week, which again reiterated the idea that it doesn't matter where you get your calories from. You need to have a caloric deficit to maintain not just weight, but health overall for the rest of your life. Whether you do, a low carbohydrate diet or a high carbohydrate diet, it doesn't matter as long as you can figure out some way to control for calories. How would you respond to that?
Right. Okay. What people need to understand is that calories are a construct. What is a construct? A construct is an idea or a model or a representation of some phenomena or another. The thing about constructs, models, representations is that they are necessarily simplifications. They are necessarily thought of. If you've got a good model, that model is a good and accurate representation of the phenomena that we're talking about. In the case of a calorie, unfortunately, that is not so. A calorie in the context of nutrition science is the way that we generally refer to so-called energy contained within our foodstuffs. We need a measurement of energy. The problem with that is that energy is itself also a construct, an idea, a model, a representation. Energy cannot be measured. The only thing we can measure is the effect of the so-called energy on something physical. some piece of kit, some system, some bit of machinery, some group of atoms or something like that. A calorie is a measurement of specifically so-called heat energy, which is actually a form of kinetic energy and nothing else. What it's measuring is, if I take a sample of food, whatever that is, of a certain amount, size, volume, and I put it inside this metal chamber that we seal up completely called a bomb calorimeter, and that bomb calorimeter has a bath of water around it with a thermometer in it, and then I put a huge electrical current through that foodstuff and completely vaporize it with a huge current immediately. What we get out of that is some carbon dioxide gas, some water vapor is released, and some heat energy comes out of that explosive vaporization of that food sample. And that immediate, we're going to nuke it with this huge current of electricity. Gone. What happens is that heat is in the form of things called photons, which are thought of as the point particle of the electromagnetic field, actually, if you want to know, but whatever, that's for another day. Photons are the things that make up light. These particular photons, these heat photons, are at a wavelength we can't see with our eyes, but nonetheless, they are there, or not there, depending on, it's about quantum physics. Again, that's for another day, don't worry about that. What happens is these photons will go out through the space in the bomb calorimeter, strike the walls of the bomb calorimeter, those metal walls, excite those metal crystals in that metal bomb calorimeter, and the excitement is in the form of causing the atoms and molecules in that metal to vibrate, like so, or like so, or rotate, whatever. And then that kinetic energy in those molecules is then passed on to the water outside the bomb calorimeter. So the so-called energy passes through the air to the wall of the bomb calorimeter, then through the bomb calorimeter to the water. And eventually it strikes the water and causes the water molecules to start to move more rapidly. That force, if you like, is translated to the water molecules, and they heat up, and the thermometer says, well, you've gone up by 1 degree C. A calorie is the amount of so-called energy released by completely exploding a food substance in the bomb calorimeter, sufficient to heat 1 gram of water, or 1 milliliter of water, by 1 degree Celsius. Okay, great. Is that what your body does with food? Explode it rapidly and release a whole bunch of energy out of it? No, that's not what it does. Also, we spoke about the actual physical phenomena, the thing that we're actually measuring the effect of here is photons, point particles of light, which have a rest mass of 0. So, answer me this, Casey, just for fun. Any amount of weight that your body is, plus any amount of photons, each of which weigh nothing at all, will change your weight by how much?
There you go, 0.
Done. Okay. What about if you're exuding a whole bunch of photons? How much will that change your weight?
I don't think it would change that much at all.
0 still, because any amount of weight minus 0 remains unchanged, doesn't it?
I remember that from math, yeah.
There you go. So pretty much it's not the calorie that's causing you to change weight, up or down. Here's another example of why calories in, calories out doesn't work. If I gave you a liter of water, first I weigh you on a scale, then I give you a liter of water and say, drink this, Casey, drink it all right now. And you chug back a liter of water. And then you stand on a scale, immediately having drunk that liter of water. What will happen to your weight?
My weight will go up.
Right, by 1 kilogram, because that's what a liter of water weighs. How many calories did you take in when you drank that liter of water?
0 calories.
None at all. Okay. The calorie is a loose approximation of so-called energy contained in foods. So loose, in fact, that there is no way to track a calorie accurately enough to make a predictable change to your body mass, upward or downward, unless you vastly, grossly, hugely over or under consume mass of food. Because the thing that changes your weight upwards when you eat is the retention of mass that you've taken in your food. Fats, carbohydrates, amino acids, those things weigh, those things are detected by a weighing scale. When you lose weight, it is because you have chemically interacted those carbohydrates and fats mostly with oxygen that you've breathed in at the lungs, and then you have expelled a large proportion of that mass as carbon dioxide gas, and another large portion of it remains in your body for a set period of time as water before you will then either urinate, sweat that out, comes out in your tears, your mucus, other insensible losses like vapor at the lungs when you're breathing. That is the loss of mass, not photons of light. Your body mass is a mass in, mass out exercise, not an energy in, energy out exercise. And the calorie is a measurement or an estimation of energy and not mass. So it's fundamentally flawed. Here's the other problem with it. The labels on foods, you go to a supermarket and buy a food and it says there are 1,200 calories in this prepackaged food. I'll give it that one. They are allowed by law to be out by 20% either way in terms of the actual calories that are in that thing. So there's a 40% range just by reading the label before you forget to adjust for the thermic effect of protein, which, do you know how to do that at home, Casey? Can you do that?
I don't. I can't.
Most people don't. You need a PhD mostly to actually get that one sorted out.
Missed that one.
Telling people at home, just count your calories, just read the labels, count your calories and keep a track of them. Yes, you can predictably lose weight, by which we mean fat. Let's call it what it is, because fat's not a dirty word. All right. You can lose body fat, because that's what most people are trying to do. You can lose body fat by vastly reducing the intake of mass of food. And you could precipitate that vast decrease in the mass intake by equating that mass to calories in some way, loosely. 40% out on the label, another 15, 20% on the thermic effect of protein, add another 80% on the protein, because most of the protein is not going to be oxidized for energy. It's going to be added to your body structures, because that's what protein does. And I could go on all day with the corrections that you would need to make to get anywhere near being close. That's why these people that go on about calories in, calories out always suggest what you need to do is undercut your current calorie intake by 500 at least, and do that consistently for several months to predictably lose so-called fat, weight fat. All right. That's a great idea. If you want to destroy your metabolism, subject yourself to nutrient deficiency probability and set your inflammasome and your endocrine system and your hormonal system into a flap that will set you up to fail long-term. Absolutely. Go ahead and cut your calories by more than 500 a day for several months at a time at least. Go ahead. And you will predictably lose some body fat during that time, probably. What you will do, however, though, is destroy your ability to maintain an ideal body makeup long-term. And it can be a very, very long road back. It's very, very poor advice, and you should never, ever do that.
Absolutely.
What you should do is eat a species-appropriate, species-specific diet for your speciation, that being Homo sapiens sapiens, which is 100% carnivore. No plants of any kind or plant materials of any kind.
I love that.
That'll sort it, basically. I've actually done a video that says, lose weight now, by which we mean fat, of course. In one step, no tracking, no effort. And the video basically says, well, don't eat plants. That's it.
Love it. That's it.
Yeah. Don't count anything. Look, here's another thing with the calories in, calories out, before I finally put that one to bed. In the first 2 weeks of 2022, I think it wasn't this year, last year, 14 days, I did a thing called priming, whereby you eat vastly, hugely too much massive food in order to make sure you have everything on board for doing some fasting and doing some body recomp and all that kind of stuff. It was a challenge I was doing for some videos and to help out some other influencers that have got a thing going with their program. That's the steak and butter gang, by the way, if you're interested in who that is.
Cool. Yeah.
Anyway, what I did during those 14 days was I consumed between 6 and 6,500 so-called calories a day, every day, without fail, for 14 days solid, when my usual baseline is around about the 1,800 mark. Now, according to calories in, calories out proponents, during that period of time, I should have put on quite a bit of fat weight, because it's thermodynamics, they say. And, you know, what am I talking about? It's the law of thermodynamics. Well, here's what happened. I lost 15 pounds.
Of course.
How does that work? In, calories in, calories out. Well, I'll tell you how it works. The diet is vastly, hugely anti-inflammatory. The carnivore diet. That's what I did. 6,500 calories of meat and fat.
Yeah.
That caused
That's amazing.
So that caused my body to become vastly less inflamed and dump out a bunch of water weight. So that was 12 and a half of those 15 pounds that came off my body. The other 2.5 pounds, according at least to my biometric impedance scale, which is kind of near on the accuracy, but whatever, fine. 2.5 pounds, it said, was fat that was burned off my body during those 2 weeks. So forget the water. If you're saying, oh, well, it was just water. Well, no, there was 2.5 pounds that came off in the form of fat during 14 days of 6,500 calories, most of which were fat calories. Explain that to me. How does that work? Never mind the water weight. Let's just look at that 2.5 pounds. I have tripled my caloric intake for 14 days. I was weight stable beforehand, fat stable as well. And suddenly my body dumps off fat when I've taken in vastly huge amounts of fat. It's almost as if the inflammasome has something to say, the endocrine system, the hormonal system has something to say on what gear your metabolism is in and whether it's storing or whether it's dumping off mass. Nothing to do with photons of light or heat energy or calories or the laws of thermodynamics, which, by the way, apply. The one they're talking about is the first law of thermodynamics, and it applies specifically, by definition, absolutely and unequivocally only in the context of a closed thermodynamic system, which is a system which can conduct energy, so-called, across its boundary, but not mass. This is a system that cannot gain mass or lose mass. The only thing that it can exchange with its external environment is energy in or out. That's the very sum of the first law of thermodynamics. It says the change in the internal energy of a closed thermodynamic system is equal to the specific heat capacity of that system minus any work that system is doing. So anyway, calories in, calories out, done, finished, nonsense, wrong.
Wow. Well,
massive.
Just your definition of the first law of thermodynamics. Nobody can tell you what it is. They cite it all the time. It's usually incorrect, and they have no idea what it's even talking about. And when I first got certified as a personal trainer back in 2007, I got trained to use metabolic carts, and we would measure resting metabolic rate for people. And we had nice little sliders. We could say, like, okay, well, you're burning 1,200 calories at rest. You burn this many calories working. You're doing 500 calorie workouts. So let's slide this thing down, and this will show you if you reduce your calories by this much, you'll lose 1.5 pounds this week. We'll do that for as many weeks as you need to lose weight. And that gave us a great opportunity to just show people that they were really terrible at following the advice, because it would slow down and not work. And then we'd run the test again a few months later, and that number may have dropped to 900 calories. So now they're not even burning as many calories as they were in the beginning, which is exactly what you explained. So I really appreciate that explanation. Very thoughtful.
Cool.
That's great. Okay, another thing that people say, you need to eat a balanced diet. You need to have moderation. You need to have balance between carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. Not too much of each. A good balanced diet will include all of those things. What is your response to that?
Well, my response to that is that it's complete and utter hogwash. It's nonsense. You see, it's a great piece of marketing. It's an awesome piece of marketing. You take a powerful concept, a powerful construct, again, a construct that people relate to. Balance. Balance is thought of to be equated with goodness and light and everything that we should aspire to in the universe. Goodness, the Lady of Justice even has a pair of scales in one hand, because, you know, justice and goodness and light is all about balance. Here's the thing, though. Here's the problem with that. Every single animal on this planet, including human beings, has evolved over a significant period of time on this planet, 4 billion years, give or take, in a specific niche. Okay, what do cats eat? Well, they're carnivores. We know that because they have sharp, pointy teeth like this, and they catch things and kill them and eat them. Okay. What do blue whales eat? Well, they eat plankton. They don't have sharp, pointy teeth, but they're still a carnivore. Interesting, isn't it? The biggest carnivore on the planet. No teeth
I
at all.
actually didn't even think about that. That's a good point.
No teeth. I mean, all these people that say, oh, it can't be a carnivore because look, we don't have sharp, pointy teeth like this. Well, that's awesome. Blue whale. Would somebody like to say they haven't got the memo? Let them know that they should stop eating plankton immediately because they don't have sharp, pointy teeth. What about the hagfish? The hagfish is a scavenger that eats dead whales mostly. They have an opening at the front of their body that's kind of like a mouth, never closes. There's got no teeth in it, just raspy pads to get the rotting flesh off the dead animals. Somebody tell them that on a carnivore too. How about birds of prey? They only have a beak, no sharp, pointy teeth. They do have the claws, mind, but every animal has evolved in a niche with a technique of feeding themselves. Now, what I say to these people that say we can't be carnivores because look at our teeth. Okay, well, number one, we evolved from animals that ate fruit and lived in trees, and there was no negative selection pressure that would cause our body format to change shape so that we do have sharp, pointy teeth. Here's why. We have a brain. We have the ability to communicate with one another. We have opposable thumbs and can fashion tools like sharp, pointy sticks. We can throw stones. We can string guts of animals across sticks and fire other pointy sticks. We can work together. We can yell and scream and make a lot of noise, and we can scare animals and, all of that. So we don't need sharp, pointy teeth. I have never seen a cave painting of hunting men diving at woolly mammoths with their mouths open. They've always got sharp, pointy sticks. That's our technique. We developed with that. That's how we've evolved. And then you look at our organ systems, our body plan, our metabolic pathways, the structures in our digestive system, and we do some comparative anatomy and physiology, and we go, geez, we look much more like a carnivore than we look like a herbivore in any way, shape, or form. And then you go to something like stable isotope testing. And stable isotope testing is done with nitrogen isotopes found in the long bones of skeletal remains of humans found anywhere on the planet of any age over about 11,000 years and under about 350,000, because that's how long humans have been here on the planet in our current speciation. Throughout that time, 350,000 years ago, give or take, up to about 11,000 years ago, what human beings ate was unequivocally, absolutely, without any question, that means meat and fat of animals. Almost no plant material of any kind whatsoever. Makes sense because for most of that time, the earth was frozen over and there wasn't too many plants to be had, frankly. So that's a definite answer. That's what we have eaten. That's how our body plans are. That's basic common sense. But the absolute slam dunk, other than the nitrogen testing that says that's what we did eat, you look at our metabolic pathways and you look at what the systems are and how they work and how they interact. And the question is, are our metabolic pathways designed that we can do well consuming a diet which is mixed in terms of most notably carbohydrates and fats at the same time? The answer is no. We have it's called a cycle, and I don't know why, because it's not a cycle. We have parts of our metabolic pathway that work together in a certain way. It's called the Randall cycle because it was proposed originally by a bloke called Sir Philip Randall in about 1962 or 63. So this is not new information. We've known about this a long time. What Philip Randall proposed was that anytime you have a significant amount of both fat and carbohydrate in your diet at the same time, those two nutrients will lock each other out, will compete each other out for access to the mitochondria for oxidative phosphorylation to produce ATP for metabolic work. Think of it this way. Two fat men trying to push their way through a revolving door designed for one at the same time, and being ever harder pushed from behind by fat men on each side. That's basically the most simple analogy for the Randall cycle I can come up with, really.
I love that.
So what you get is, if you eat a diet that's rich in fat and protein, no problem. Your body will metabolize the fat for energy and use the protein for body structures. Any excess fat will be stored on your body as fat, pretty much, because the body is thrifty and it won't be wasting resources. And it will save that for a rainy day, because also we evolved not eating every day, let alone 4 and 5 times a day. We ate every other day, every third day, when we were lucky enough to take down a beast, basically. So there's that. If you take in a diet that's rich in carbohydrate and has some protein in it, sure, and is poor in fats, the Randall cycle won't be a problem for you either, unless you intake a vast amount of carbohydrate, which a lot of these people do. So that's fine as well in terms of the Randall cycle. But one of those diets, the one that's rich in protein and animal fat, and the one that's rich in plant materials but poor in animal products, one of those diets is destitute of nutrition required by a human being, and one of them is not. So while you alleviate the short-term issue, the Randall cycle, you subject yourself to the very real probability of catastrophic health failure down the track if you don't eat a species-appropriate, species-specific diet of the flesh. And by flesh, I mean muscle meat, not organs, muscle meat and fat of large ruminant animals, no plants. Okay. What is the problem with the Randall cycle being activated all the time? Well, the Randall cycle is not an on-off switch. It's more like a fader that you would pull up and down on an audio board. It has a hysteresis, which means it's like an inertia. You can pull the fader immediately by changing what you eat, but there is a time delay on that effect filtering through to your metabolic system. And it can be several hours before your body reacts and changes direction in terms of your metabolic state. So while ever you've got all this vast overplus of energy in your bloodstream, and ergo, therefore trying to enter your cells to be oxidized for energy, fats and carbohydrates, this mixture, you're awash with substrate to use for that. Your mitochondria is jammed up because of the fat men trying to get through the door. Nothing can get through, or a lot less, because it's a fader, not an on-off. What happens then is that the redox potential of the cells will drop, because the cells will be using up the energy. Nonetheless, the energy can't flow through because they're cross-competing each other out. When that happens, the amount of ATP that you can produce drops. So the amount of work that your cells can do drops, firstly. And secondly, the concentration of ADP plus inorganic phosphate builds up in the cell. Inorganic phosphate binds to a whole bunch of cytokines, pro-inflammatory cytokines, and activates them and turns them on. When you become inflamed, it's because inorganic phosphate has bound to that cytokine and set that system off. So you're going to spend 3, 4, 5 hours inflamed because you've eaten the mixed diet. And then it'll all filter through and everything will stabilize and you'll go back to normal and that'll be fine. By which stage you'll feel hungry again and you'll repeat that again. You'll eat another meal that's mixed in terms of carbohydrate and fat, and you'll inflame yourself again for the next 4 or 5. You'll spend your whole life inflamed, basically. And inflammation is the absolute underpinning cause, the etiology of atherosclerosis heart disease. That's an inflammatory response, not a lipid problem at all. Okay. Further to heart disease, it's the cause of type 2 diabetes, heading towards type 1 diabetes, all sorts of autoimmune conditions, most forms of dementia, basically all the big killers in Western society. They are all underpinned by chronic systemic inflammation as a result of eating a diet which is inappropriate for your species. Simple as that. What is the answer? Stop eating plants.
Thank you.
Caveat, don't stop eating plants overnight. Don't go, Professor Bart K said, so I'm doing it tomorrow. No, change your diet from whatever it is to what it should be, glacially, slowly. Do that over 6 or 8 weeks. If you change your diet overnight, you will upset your microbiome. That will inflame you. That will set you back months. You will get loose stool probably. You'll get all sorts of aches and pains. You'll get rheumatic things. You'll get skin breakouts. Your life will be terrible because you started suddenly feeding your microbiome something different completely overnight. Don't do that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great advice. That's great advice. I think the original toilet paper run of 2020 was caused by so many people doing World Carnivore Month in January, but that by the time March came around, there's no more toilet paper for anybody else because of what you're saying. That's a really great point, and you are the best in the world, in my opinion, of explaining the Randall cycle. It's wonderful. It's a great analogy to think about, and if we think also critically about how we got our food, like in nature, there is not carbohydrates and fat together. There's fat and protein together, and there's also carbohydrates. They're separate generally, unless you're talking about dairy or maybe a few other examples that I'm not aware of. You don't find those two things together. And the way that most people consume their fat and their protein these days is in a hamburger with a bun, with a soda and the fries, or it's a pizza, or it is a burrito. Like everything is mixed. And so you definitely do get that sense of like, if somebody is eating that way all day, every day for many years, and that doorway, that metabolic pathway is plugged up, that's going to be a huge problem.
And there's also a tendency to overeat, leading to weight gain, fat gain, obesity, which in and of itself will reinforce that inflamed state of being.
Yeah.
And high blood pressure. You're asking for heart disease.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Okay, well, that leaves a problem with where are we going to get our nutrients? Because everybody knows you need, in particular, fruits and vegetables for all the nutrients they have, definitely for the vitamin C, and we need the fiber also. What is your response to that when people say, well, we need some plant nutrients in our diet?
Yeah, more very, very effective marketing of ideas that are fundamentally at their root false. False, actually. Let me tell you what the exact dietary requirement for fiber, indigestible fiber, there's the clue, indigestible, is in the human nutrition. Not 1 gram ever. You do not require fiber to thrive, survive, do well, move your bowels on a daily basis, be happy, robust, fit, healthy, any of it. The exact requirement for fiber is none ever at all. So that's that one. There is no science that says otherwise. And in fact, there are plenty of anecdotes that clearly support what I'm saying in terms of the need for fiber. I myself have consumed almost no fiber for about 8.5 years now. Richard Rodriguez, 40 years, 4 decades without any fiber. I'm trying to imagine what it would be like to be constipated for 40 years.
Be pretty backed up.
You would, wouldn't you? What about 65 years from Maggie, the rancher? 65 years, no fiber. Clearly, the three of us are examples of superhumans who are not members of the human race, clearly, because everybody knows you need fiber, otherwise you get constipated. Well, actually, there is only one study that even remotely pseudo-clinically looks at this issue. And it was done on a bunch of, I think it was 64 participants who presented with what is referred to as idiopathic constipation. Idiopathic is a medical term, and it means we don't know what the cause is. Now, doctors cannot admit we don't know anything. Doctors think they know everything and say, I know everything. So we can't say we don't know what the cause is. We have to use a big word that people don't understand. And that's what it is. It's idiopathic constipation in this case. And these 64 people were randomized to one of, I think it was 4 different interventions, with everything else controlled as best as they could in such a study. And the interventions were: keep your diet the same with the same amount of fiber that you're currently eating. Don't change anything. You're a control group. Another group of people were asked to increase the amount of fiber still further by another 25%. A third group were asked to reduce their fiber by 50%. And a fourth group were asked to remove all fiber from their diet whatsoever. And then they were followed for X number of weeks to see what happened. There was a dose response relationship between the outcomes for constipation, straining, effort, anal bleeding, all sorts of stuff like that. Basically, it goes like this. The people that increased their fiber got worse. The people that didn't change anything continued the same degree of constipation. The people that reduced their fiber by half had a roughly 50% reduction in their symptoms. And the people that removed all the fiber from their diet, every single one of them had a complete remission of all symptoms and returned to normal bowel function. One perfectly formed, easily expelled bowel movement per day, every day without fail. So no, you don't need fiber to keep you regular. Fiber will jam you up. Fiber will gum you up. Fiber will physically damage the lining of your colon and cause you inflammation, leaky gut, chronic systemic inflammation, and all sorts of secondary health complaints. The last thing you want to put into your colon is something you cannot digest. Oh, yes, but it bulks out my stool. Fantastic. Why in a purple fit do you want bulky stools? Why would you want that? Anyway, so no, you don't need any fiber. Vitamin C is an interesting one. Yes, we do require vitamin C in order to retain health and have longevity and all that. If there is a shortage of vitamin C in your system, you will experience a condition called scurvy. Vitamin C is vital in the formation of the most common protein in your body. It's called collagen. It's the one that they do the nitrogen testing on in the skeletal bones, just to bring that back to, oh yes, collagen. Most protein in your body is collagen. It's by far the most of your protein. If you don't have enough vitamin C, you can't form collagen. So basically your body starts to dissolve. You won't heal injuries. You'll have bleeding gums. Your joints will start to pack up, I should say. You might start bleeding from all sorts of orifices. Scurvy can be fatal. Scurvy is not a good thing to get. You need some vitamin C, absolutely. How much vitamin C do you need? Well, that's where the RDIs have it wrong, because they'll say it's X number of milligrams per day of vitamin C is what you need. Plus they add on a safety margin, because they say that vitamin C is harmless, and in overplus, you'll urinate out any excess because it's water-based, they'll say. So let's put on a safety margin as well on top of that. And you'll end up with this dose, this massive dose of vitamin C that you should be taking every day, according to the powers that be. Well, here's the thing. There is a transporter that's involved in getting vitamin C out of your bloodstream into the cells where it's needed to do its work. Like anything, most things don't just cross the barrier of the membrane of cells. They need to be transported by a specific transporter for that purpose. Well, vitamin C is no different. It has one of those too. The transporter that transports vitamin C out of the blood and into cells is one called GLUT4. Heard of it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. GLUT4 is the one that transports glucose out of your bloodstream into the cells. It's the same one. So what we've got is another fat man in the door situation, haven't we? If you've got a huge amount of glucose in your bloodstream trying to bully its way through that door into cells, poor old vitamin C gets shoved out of the way because there's much less of that. So what we need to do is bolster our vitamin C hugely in order to get any into our cells. That's why the RDIs are so high, because people are assumed to be eating a bunch of stuff that needs to be transported into cells on GLUT4. In other words, carbohydrates. Remove all the carbohydrate from your diet, and now the GLUT4 transporter is free. There aren't any fat glucose men trying to push through that door. So vitamin C can just walk through. So what you actually need as a carnivore in terms of vitamin C to prevent scurvy is almost none. Like it's nanograms per deciliter in your blood on a daily basis. Luckily, and strangely enough, given that that's how we actually have evolved over the last at least 4.5 million years, there's enough vitamin C found in the muscle meat of large ruminant animals. It's incredible. It's almost as if that's what we've been eating, and that was enough. Absolutely incredible. So people say, oh, yes, fine, scurvy, but what about antioxidant effect of vitamin C? That's very important. Yes, the antioxidant effect can be important, the water-based antioxidant that you'll find vitamin C is a member of the family of things that will do that. There's another one that will do the same thing, and actually much better than vitamin C does. Do you know what it is?
I don't.
It's uric acid.
Mm.
Urate. Where do you get that from? Well, you get that from eating meat. Okay, so the base is covered. So we don't need a huge amount of vitamin C. And in fact, it is true that most of the excess vitamin C in your system is urinated out if you don't need it. That is true, but not all of it. Some of the excess vitamin C is metabolized and it breaks down in the metabolic system to something else. Do you know what that is?
I should know this.
It's oxalate.
There you go.
You don't want oxalate building up in your system.
No, you don't.
So vitamin C covered, fiber covered. The exact dietary requirement for carbohydrate in the human diet is the same as for fiber, not 1 single gram ever. Your body has a system called gluconeogenesis, which is capable of generating all the glucose you require for all purposes metabolically, and it makes it out of non-glucose precursors, like the glycerol backbones of triacylglyceride molecules, fat, basically, like certain amino acids, if they are present in excess, and monocarboxylates such as lactate, for example. They can all be transmuted into glucose, and your body does that. Ergo, the dietary requirement for glucose is none at all, ever, not 1 single gram. So, okay, phytochemicals. There are phytochemicals in plants that we absolutely need according to what we've been told. Well, 8.5 years, not short on anything, except patience, perhaps, me. Richard Rodriguez, 4 decades, no plants, no deficiencies, no gray hair, no sign of weakness, no sign that he's over 35 when he's in his mid-50s. Maggie, 65 years, carnivore, no plants, no fiber, no vitamin C, no phytochemicals, tall, lithe, strong, still works a full day as a rancher, hard work, hard yakker, looks to be not more than 50, sounds like she's not more than 50, is as bright as a button, and will probably outlive all of us because she hasn't abused her body at all since she was 15. I only came to this in my mid-30s, really. Or actually, more like mid to late 40s.
Yeah.
By the time I was fully carnivore. So I've done a lot of damage that needs to be reversed that Maggie did not do, for example, and Richard did not do, Rick did not do. So, I mean, I think it's covered. There are those out there who will tell you that you need to eat a balanced diet, you need to eat plant material, you need phytochemicals, you need fiber, you need vitamin C, though, blah, 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 blah. All of that stuff is bought and paid for in terms of those people being indoctrinated to, because they really believe it, these people. They're not, most people that say these things are not evil people that want to do you harm. They are people that have been indoctrinated, brainwashed by an evil machine that is underpinned by a bottom right-hand corner, a profit and loss statement at the end of the year. And it is high past time that we as individuals started to think about the misinformation that we're being fed and subjecting what we're being told to even a moment of cursory refutation to see whether or not it's correct. Okay, if you need a pile of vitamin C to do well, then there should be nobody that you can find anywhere around the world who does not eat a bunch of excess vitamin C, takes in basically no vitamin C to speak of, These people should not exist. There are millions of people around the world who currently subscribe to the carnivore lifestyle. Subscribers of myself, Dr. Ken Berry, Dr. Sean Baker, did I mention Dr. Chafee in Australia? There are all sorts of us now who are out there with hundreds of thousands. I've only got tens of thousands. Some of them have got hundreds of thousands. Some of them have got millions of followers who are subscribing to this diet. There are not millions of people dropping dead from scurvy every week.
That's right.
Something is wrong with what you've been told.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's right. If this population is not suddenly dying of scurvy or heart attacks or whatever else people think is going to happen, like that would kill the diet completely. That would make headlines across the world forever. And
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's such a good point. My
Yeah,
final
and we'd all be locked up for saying it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you know all about getting censored for
Oh,
saying
yes.
things like that.
Oh, yes, I can tell you about censorship. That's for another day.
That's for another day. Okay, well, my final question is, in the carnivore space, there seems to be a trend with some people, also followers, who got a lot of people onto the carnivore diet, wrote lots of books, and they were strict carnivore. They took in lots of organs. Ironically, I noticed that lots of times they sell organ products of some kind,
Yeah,
and then something happens with their health to where something's not working anymore, and now they have to consume massive amounts of fruit and fructose, and then they go out and promote that to everybody. And what I'm noticing around me is so many carnivores, they go, oh yeah, okay, great, let me get fruit back in my diet, and that starts them right back down into the cycle of craving sugar. And now they're not just eating fruit anymore, they're eating all kinds of garbage that they don't want to eat, and they give up all their progress. Fructose and the carnivore diet. Do you need to consume fruit and honey along with eating carnivore nose to tail?
Yeah, okay, let me be really clear on this. I think I have been. I think everybody knows who we're talking about, and I think everybody knows which one of us is credible, frankly. What you need to understand about that individual is that his training is in allopathic medicine. Then he specialized thereafter in psychiatry. That individual is not trained in nutrition science, or in fact in science of any kind. Further to that, using the moniker doctor and the title MD in his name, I think is a bit rich, given that he, in my understanding, has practiced medicine not one single day in his life in any field, actually, as a physician. He did a couple of rotations, and he has 2 specializations, allopathic, general medicine, and psychiatry, which he's never used. He decided, I'm going to be a YouTube influencer instead. Well, good luck to him. Great, fine. His level of competence in reading scientific papers, I have shown in various videos on my channel to be laughable. He's embarrassed himself completely on a number of occasions and said things that are demonstrably wrong. Here's what he got wrong, that individual. Number 1, it is vital in my mind that you eat the vast majority of your protein in one sitting in 1 meal a day, especially on a very low carbohydrate diet. Reason: you need a small bump in your insulin every day to keep your kidney tissue from becoming leaky to electrolytes. It's not like the spike you'll get from carbohydrate intake. It's more like a sleeping policeman, or a judder bar, they're called in some parts of the world. A bump in the road. Just a little bump in your insulin. What that does is that your kidney tissue senses that insulin, and it keeps its gap junctions and its ability to filter electrolytes in or out of the blood in the urine. Either way, it's a way of maintaining your electrolytes. If you don't have that because you don't eat sufficient protein in one hit, then your kidneys will become leaky and you'll start basically urinating out all your electrolytes, and that will cause you all sorts of problems, like the exact problems that individual we're talking about experienced with leg cramps, heart palpitations, sleep disturbances, etc. Okay. Was he eating enough protein? He was for most people, but not for him, because he's very, very highly physically active, that particular individual. 3 hours a day surfing, at least, and weight training on top of that he's doing. and running a YouTube channel and doing social media and all of these, all of that stuff. It's all physical stuff. And he was eating 3, 4, and 5 times a day, smaller meals. He shouldn't have done that. He should have eaten 1 meal a day to get his protein in to stop his kidneys from being leaky. And he needed more protein than most people. He's a bigger man than I am by quite a bit. He's at least 30 pounds heavier than I am. He's very, very active. I am not. He's 5 or 6 years younger than I am. So there's a metabolic thing there as well. Great. So he had that wrong. Secondly, if you consume a bunch of organs, like most notably liver, you will be taking in a huge, vast overplus of copper. People think the problem with too much liver is vitamin A toxicity. No, it's copper is the problem. It throws out your copper to zinc ratio, and that will cause your kidneys to flush out even more electrolytes and cause even more problems for you. So he had that problem compounded by the fact that the ever truthful Liver King was telling him that this is great stuff and you should eat these and market these freeze-dried liver pills. And he was, business-wise, he was in bed with that guy who absolutely never took the juice in his life, of course.
Ever truthful. I love that.
Yeah, but by the way, listen very carefully. If you get nothing else from this, anytime you see a bloke with that kind of physique anywhere in the world, people, that bloke is juicing. That is not natural. You cannot achieve that naturally. Is that person natty? It's not even a question. No is the answer. They are on the juice. Yes, him too. Anyway, that's for another day. So what that individual that we're talking about did was ate not enough protein in one meal, ate too many smaller meals of protein, and perhaps not enough protein for him overall. He compounded that by poisoning himself with copper. That caused an electrolyte disturbance and dysfunction that caused all his problems, which of course are solved by pouring carbohydrate down his neck in ever increasing amounts. He's up to 400 grams a day now, the boy is, of carbohydrate.
Oh my goodness.
Simple sugars going down his neck in the form of fructose and sucrose. 400 grams, Casey, I kid you not, that's what's going in there. I had a look at a video the day that he's done recently, and I did the calculations myself. And he's talking about, I'm eating a couple of 100 grams. No, it's 400 grams is what's going in there. Now, a lot of that is fructose. So that will predispose towards fatty liver. He's getting away with that at the moment because he's so active and is oxidizing so much of that for energy that it's not causing that problem yet. But it will. The thing that he's not escaping, and you can see it written all over his face, actually. If you look at a video made by that psychiatrist that we're talking about, even 2 years ago, and look at his skin, look at his face, look at his body language, look at his posture, look at everything about him, look at his eyes and, his facial features and everything else. And then next to that, put an image of him from a video that he's made in the last month or two, even just 2 years later. It will blow your mind how much damage that boy has done to his body. And the damage he's done is called glycation. And that's when a sugar molecule appends itself to protein structures, fat structures, and things in your body, and chemically changes it, deranges it, and interferes with its function. It gives you leathery looking skin. It gives you wrinkles. You'll see that his eyes have caved into the back of his head and he's got these cavernous hollowed eye sockets. He's grayed hugely in the last couple of years. His body posture is different. His muscularity is actually melted incredibly. His body is hugely, vastly damaged by fructose, mostly, and some glucose binding to his body cells, the components of the cells, the proteins and fats and things that should not have sugar bound to them. It's like A1C. The A1C in your blood is a reading of damage to your blood cells by glucose, specifically, by the way. Another thing he's got wrong. He says, no, It can read fructose and mine's fine. No, it can't. An A1C test cannot detect fructose damage.
That's right. That's right.
Only glucose, by the way. So A1C measures damage to your blood cells specifically, but the rest of the cells in your body also undergo damage as well. There's no test for that, except looking at the boy and going, "Whew, how's it going for you? You know, is it going well for you there in Costa Rica?" No, it's not going well for him at all. His health is collapsing, and he won't last much longer in terms of what he's currently doing. He will have to once again do a mea culpa and say, "I was wrong," because there's no question he is wrong. He is doing huge damage to his body through fructose molecules binding to his tissues. It will, if he doesn't stop it, it will kill him.
Wow.
At some point.
Wow. Wow. Well, thank you for that wonderful answer. I really don't want to name names. So what do you think is more, what do you think is less obvious? Should we say P. Saladino, or would it be better to do Paul S? I can't decide which one would be more obvious.
I think we all know who we're talking about by now, if we didn't already.
Oh man, it's just, yeah, it's a shame. It's somebody that I have respected. I loved his book. I thought he did a wonderful job. I love how he helped draw many people into the carnivore diet and made it approachable, and to see it go in that direction, and again to see the fallout from the everyday people that are trying to do the diet and they're getting re-addicted to carbohydrates. It sucks. It's a real bummer, and I hope that sooner rather than later he can, get to that point where he's going to need to change, and hopefully that message can get out, and hopefully he can save his own health. Bart, this has been such an amazing conversation. We've gone through lots of different myths, and I've really appreciated your time and your consideration when answering some of these questions, where I've learned a lot for sure, and I've really enjoyed following you and your content for so long. Where would you like people to go to find you, to connect with you and your work?
Right. Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to say it's been my privilege and my pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me. It's all about the cross-pollination. If people want to find me and my work, the first place, the one-stop shop, if you like, is I do most of my material on the YouTubes, and all you have to do is punch in at Bart, B-A-R-T, hyphen K-A-Y, and you will find me. You will also find underneath every single one of the videos posted on that channel links to my 4 or 5 other YouTube channels where I do play other characters, and Yellow Ted might appear on one of those channels, and all sorts of things like that might be going on. It's good fun. Also, I have an Odysee channel on the Odysee platform, which is a parallel to the YouTubes, but a much smaller platform with a much smaller reach at this time. Most of my back catalogue of videos before about a year ago are actually there, right back to the beginning. Some of the cringy videos, the poor video quality, the poor audio quality, before I was kind of a bit polished at presenting. So people can check out the whole back catalogue over there on Odysee, which is Odysee. The reason that most of those videos are over there is because YouTube changed their terms of service and started back applying their rules to videos that didn't breach the terms of service at the time they were uploaded, but now do, and started issuing punishments to people for not breaking the rules at the time. Made perfect sense. Anyway, so the only way to respond to that was to take the whole lot down, clear out house, put it over there. So that's where that is, Odysee, Odysee. And if you look for Bart K Nutrition Science Watchdog as the channel, you'll find there's about 13 or 1400 videos there that you won't find on the YouTubes.
Wow.
You'll also find me on the Instagram, and that is, I think it's Bart underscore K underscore nutrition or something like that. You'll find me. I've got a Twitter account, which is mainly about arguing with idiots for fun when I can be bothered. What else can I tell you? That's about it. I would say those are the places to go.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We will link to all of that in the show notes. I didn't know about the Odysee as a platform. That's cool to have an alternative. I know a lot of people are trying to get away from some of the social medias, including YouTube, and the censorship, like we talked about earlier, is just getting too much for a lot of people. So it's nice to have other platforms like that. Like I said, we'll link to all of that in the notes. Professor Bart K, thank you again so very much. It was the highest honor to chat with you today, and I really appreciate your content and your wisdom, and thank you for sharing that with us today. We really appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.